Let's create a new repository inside of GitHub. So GitHub is a platform that allows you to store your Git project on the internet. This makes it so if anything happens to the project while it's on your computer, say you accidentally delete it or potentially the computer explodes, you can still have a backup on the GitHub platform. So let's get started on a new repository. So there are a few different ways that you can get to the new repository screen. You can click on this button and it'll take you to that screen, or you could go to this drop down with this plus symbol and go to new repository. Or on this home screen, you can also create a new repository from this little card that allows you to create a new repository really easily. But let's go through this new button so we can see all of the options. So here we have a few things to fill out. The first option is a repository template. And this will be a drop down that has all of the available templates to you. Basically, when you create the repository, it'll have pre-populated files and folders and stuff based on the template that you're using. You can also create your own template by creating a repository, and then in the settings, you can switch it to a template repository. This will then allow you to see and use templates inside of the creation of a new repository. The next option is the owner, and this will usually just be your account, but if you're a part of an organization, you can also select the organization that you're a part of to put the repository under that particular owner. Once you've selected the owner, you can then give it a name. So for this, I'll just call it new repo. Now, the name cannot conflict with any other names that this owner already has. So if you have a repository called new repo already, you can't create a new one with the same name. You'll have to give it a different name. The next text box is the description, and this is completely optional. It just allows you to describe what the repository is, and it kind of gives you a little blurb underneath the name when you're looking at your repositories. So I'll just give it the description, the great description of a new repo. The next option is to either make it public or private. Just so you know, if you do make it private, potentially, if you do use GitHub Actions, they will incur some sort of a cost to your user. So just be aware of that. If you make it public, your GitHub Actions will actually use a public runner, which is a pooled instance of the GitHub Actions. So basically, you're kind of at the whim of everybody else utilizing the actions. Also, like the name suggests, public means anybody can see it. Private means only the user or the people that the user allows can see it. Since this is a fresh repository, you can also add a README file, and this will automatically submit a commit into the repository. So just be aware, if you already have a Git repository created on your local machine, you might end up with merge conflicts if you do add this README. You'll just have to resolve those merge conflicts, which could be a pain, but it's whatever. The next thing is to add a git ignore file that's specific to basically what you're making. If you're coding in Java, for instance, it'll take out the target directory, or if you're programming a front end through Node, it would take out that Node modules directory. This is nice for fresh repositories, but again, you're adding a file to your repo, so just be aware of that you might end up with merge conflicts if you already have a pre-existing Git repo. The last thing is a license, and this will just protect your repository from certain things based off of what license that you choose. And there are a bunch of different options for licenses that you can choose from. For now, I'll just leave this all empty and then I'll hit create repository. Now, if you left everything empty, what you'll come to is a screen like this where you can see that there are a few different options that you have to take. First, you can clone this repository and then make commits to it and then push those commits up to GitHub, and then you'll be able to see any of those files or folders that you've pushed. For instance, this part is walking you through how to do exactly that. Or if you already have an existing repository, which you might already have, you can do this to add this as a remote and then push all of your Git branches up into this repository. Now, to do any of this, you'll need to have Git installed. And to get Git, what you can do is go to git-scm.com, and then it'll show you this downloads page where you can download the binary that you need for a particular operating system that you're running on. Along with this Git installation, you'll also get Git bash, and this is an application that allows you to run Git on a command line interface. So for instance, here I'm in my tutorials folder. If I do an ls, you can see I have a few different applications in here. One of them is Git Gradle, and I know that I created a Git repository inside of that project. So I'm just going to go into that project, and now I can do something like git status to see the status of my Git files. You can see I have some modified files that I haven't committed yet, but I also know that I have made some changes and some commits inside of this repository. So what I'm going to do is copy and paste exactly what the GitHub page told me to do. If I go back to the GitHub page, you can see that there are a few commands that it wants me to run. So what I can do is I can just keep copying these. I'll copy the first one so that we can see these get ran consecutively. Then I'll go back to git bash and I'll paste it in and I'll hit enter. So now I've added the remote origin for this GitHub repository to this local Git repo. So from here, I can take the next command, paste it in, hit enter, and I've created a main branch. Actually, I've already had the main branch. I just switched to it since I already had it. Then I'll go back, I'll copy the last thing, and this will push the changes up to GitHub. You can see the result is that it created a new branch called main, and it pushed it to main. And now this main branch is set to track the origin main branch, which is the GitHub main branch. If we go back to our GitHub repository, what we can do is hit Control R or refresh the page. And now we'll see all of the code and folders that were associated with that Git repo that I had locally. So this is really useful to have your code on the internet as well as a local repository, because now unless GitHub goes down, I'll have access to this product or this code, and I don't have to necessarily keep copying folders and put them on flash drives or things like that. So that is how you create a new repository inside of GitHub.